Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Brooke Schumann, and I'm with the TCU Alumni Association, and I'm here with my colleague Terrence Hood from the Career Center, and we're so excited to have you all join us. We're allowing everybody to get logged in. Hopefully your Zoom has updated. Seems like we went through a phase where everybody's Zoom was fresh, up to date every day, but back to making sure that it is updated. Before we get started with our special guest, Hallie Crawford, today to talk to us about career brainstorming, I will again welcome you from the TCU Alumni Association. I'll allow my colleague Terrence Hood to introduce himself before we turn it over to Hallie. Terrence?
Hello, everyone. Again, Terrence Hood, Associate Director in the Career Center, and I work with alumni from all walks of life. So as the person who meets with alumni, this topic is top of mind in terms of the number of appointments I see. What is the concern on the minds of many of our alums? Many of them want to know, what should I be doing with my life? What are my next steps? So this is a very timely topic, and I'm sure you're going to get some nuggets of wisdom. And I'm looking forward to it as well. So Hallie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Greatly appreciate it. I'm happy to be here. So let's go ahead and dive in. So we're going to talk about career brainstorming. And it's interesting that you say that, Terrence, because we have found the same thing, that people are really wanting to know, okay, what is the right next step for me? A lot has happened in the world and in the economy, obviously, in the past several years. And I think we're starting to still feel, or not starting to, I think we're continuing to kind of feel the after effects or the repercussions of that. And a lot of us kind of reevaluated or have continued to reevaluate our priorities and what's important to us personally, but also professionally. So we're going to share with you three kind of methods, if you will, to uncover and determine the right career direction. And I think the good news too is that there's a lot of different jobs out there that have either been created or things that have changed, during and since COVID. And there are also so many different types of career paths that we just don't even know about. So we're going to help you kind of identify and uncover what some of those are. I'll be looking back and forth a little bit here today because I've got two screens, as I think most of us do. And just a quick background and intro for me, I'm a certified career coach. I've been coaching and training since 2002. Proud partner with TCU. We've done a lot of webinars with the Alumni Association there and love doing so. Undergraduate degree from Vanderbilt and a graduate degree from the University of Illinois. And the advice that we're going to give you today and tips and tools is advice that we give to all of our clients to help them what we call create a career they love. Our goal is for people to be in jobs that make them want to jump out of bed in the morning to go to work and be excited and fulfilled and enthusiastic. And I think that there's usually at least one silver lining to all of our difficult situations. And I think COVID, as we all know, it changed not just the way we work, but what we want out of our work. So a lot of people's priorities changed. And what we're finding with our clients is that more and more people are not just, wanting to have that greater sense of fulfillment and satisfaction out of their work, but they're kind of demanding it in a way. And employers, I think, in a good way, are listening more and more to that and are making adjustments to their benefits, to the way people work and people's jobs and what they can offer to us to kind of meet that need, if you will. And we have always felt, if you look at the bottom right-hand side of this next slide, that it's really important to always be or become and stay engaged at work. And I think that people are kind of valuing that even more and more these days, which is great. And one of the things we're going to talk about today is being able to identify and align your career as much as you possibly can with your career values is a really good way to start thinking about what career path would be rewarding and fulfilling for me and what would be the right way to go, if you will. So let's look at our agenda on the next slide here and what we're going to be talking about today and just a couple of quick housekeeping items as well. So we've got 3 steps that we'll share with you and the 3 ways that we want people to brainstorm different career ideas and see what else is out there. First, we want you to define fulfillment, and we'll talk about why that's important and how to do so. Second, we'd love it if you would take advantage of our ideal career model to help brainstorm different ideas, and we'll demonstrate how you can do that. And then we actually have a very specific career brainstorming process. So if we take everything that we talk about at the beginning and then use those different elements to leverage this brainstorming, this career brainstorming process that we use with our clients and recommend to them. And that will be 3 kind of sub steps, if you will, and how to see what else is out there. Because again, like we said at the beginning, there are just so many different types of jobs that we don't even know exist. We will have time for Q&A at the end of our session today, but if you have questions along the way and want to ask them, please feel free to put them either in the Q&A box or in the chat box. I've got both open, so I'll keep an eye on those, but we will have time bookmarked for Q&A at the end. And then also, if anyone would like a copy of our slides, in addition to receiving a copy of the recording, which you will get automatically, you can just email us at admin@createyourcareerpath.com. This email address will be listed on all of our slides, and you can feel free to email us and we'll get those sent over to you. So let's go ahead and dive in. So first, before we even start with our 3 areas, one of the things that I always want to tell people is that I want you to have the right perspective when you're thinking about, okay, what's the right job or career path for me? We are not looking for perfection. Perfection is not going to exist. So I don't want to burst anyone's bubble, but what we want you to be thinking about when you're brainstorming different ideas is not to put so much pressure on the process that you're saying to yourself, okay, I've got to find like the perfect job and then everything will be okay. Nothing is going to be perfect. There are always situations where we're going to have to be dealing with, for example, office politics. There will always be times when certain tasks that we have to perform, or maybe even certain clients or customers or even coworkers, we may not get along with them quite as well as we would like. So nothing is going to be perfection. So just kind of put that, out there at the very beginning, and don't put so much pressure on the process. The right perspective to have is that the good stuff about your job and your career so far outweighs the bad stuff, the things that you don't like quite as much, that you barely notice those quote unquote bad things. That's the right perspective to have and the right way to think about it. And another way to kind of have the right perspective that we always share with our clients too is that you're going to have to compromise in some way, shape, or form in any job. That's just reality and part of it. But when you are choosing where you're compromising, and that's what we're going to help you figure out how to do today, you are going to feel so much better about what you're doing. And it is going to be the right fit because you've said to yourself, okay, these other couple of things over here, I'm not going to like as much, but I can compromise on those things because I've got all of these other fantastic things over here. So the good stuff so far outweighs the bad, and you are choosing where you're compromising. That's going to make you feel a lot better too. So that's kind of the right perspective to have. Now let's talk next about why this is important, and we'll give you some exercises that you can actually start with to flesh this out with your career brainstorming. So number 1, if we look at the far left here, too many people are still unsatisfied at work. There are polls that come out and surveys every couple of years. I'm sure Terrence and Brooke have, they see these all the time too, where employee engagement or satisfaction is polled and the numbers are always higher than we would like them to be. And, COVID obviously impacted that, and we've changed our priorities, like we said. So one of the things that would be a good thing for you to do, and then we'll launch, actually, if we could go ahead and launch our first poll right now while I'm talking, that would be fantastic. People can kind of fill that out while they're listening. One of the things that we find can be really, really helpful as a starting point to start to help you identify different career paths and what would work for you and what wouldn't, as well as where you could compromise versus not, is to separate what works for you at your current position or your current career path and job and what doesn't work, and create a very simple list in one column, left and right hand side of a piece of paper. Create a list of likes and dislikes. What are you still enjoying, if anything, about your current job, even if that list is really short, which we get is why you're here today. And what are the things that you don't like as much? And start to identify what the themes are in terms of what you're saying there. Is it a lot, for example, about the work environment? And so when you're brainstorming different career ideas, for example, you need to be thinking about, I can stay in the same role, but I need to be like at a different organization. Or if a lot of what you're talking about in your list of likes or dislikes relates to the tasks that you're performing, that may mean that you need to have a completely different type of job, or the same or similar job, but within maybe a different type of industry, the tasks would be different. So it's a really good idea to not just create this list, but identify the themes in what you're saying. And what's really helpful about creating this list is you're seeing things in black and white. You can be more objective about what's going on, and you can actually identify those common themes so that you know what types of changes you might need to make. And the second thing we want you to do, and then we'll look at this poll here, thanks for filling that out, is to clarify for yourself in terms of what you're unsatisfied with, and related to your job. How long have you been unsatisfied for that? Is some of this stuff that you're writing down in terms of your dislikes short-term dissatisfaction because, for example, you're working on a specific type of project or with a particular client maybe that you don't like as much? So these two steps as part of this exercise can be really helpful to get you thinking in the right way and being practical and objective about what's going on versus emotional and having like a knee-jerk reaction. So speaking of knee-jerk reaction, we're curious about how unsatisfied you are, kind of on a spectrum, and I'll explain why this is important in just a moment. And so it looks like so far with our poll, we've got 35% that are slightly, 50% that are unsatisfied, and this may be that it kind of goes up and down depending on the day or the week or whatever it is, and 15%, only 15% in a good way, are about to run out the door. So here's why we want you to think about like how unsatisfied you are on a scale. Because if you are incredibly unsatisfied, it may be that you do need to make a larger career change and think outside the box a little bit more in terms of your ideas, because there are so many things about your current position that you're unhappy with. That may indicate that you need to make a larger shift. If you're kind of on the fence and half, or only, let's say, slightly unsatisfied, again, for every person that answered the poll here, we do want you to create this list of likes and dislikes because it can help you clarify how dramatic of a change you may need to make. But if you're less unsatisfied, it may be that, for example, you can stay doing the same thing or stay kind of in the same role, or maybe the same or similar job title, but you need to just change organizations. So I just want to put this out here or out there in general, that we don't want everyone, just because you're not happy, to assume that, okay, so I need to go be a chef or something completely different than what you're doing now. 9 times out of 10 for our clients, they're able to make more of a course correction in terms of their career path versus a dramatic change and actually be really happy. So think about where you fall, not just on a scale or spectrum of how unsatisfied you are, but looking at and identifying the themes about, what your dislikes are can help you identify how dramatic of a change you need to make. Okay. So thanks for participating in that poll. That's really helpful. And we just wanted to introduce kind of that concept of where are you in terms of dissatisfaction in certain areas. And when we look at our ideal career model in just a few moments, that can help you clarify the themes a little bit more too. So let's talk about our first kind of method for career brainstorming. And we really want you to define fulfillment first. And this is our first concept, because we find that fulfillment is usually the hardest thing for people to define. And so it's really useful for them to think about this one first, because it takes a little bit more time to define. Also, it's important, we think, first, because people are demanding this more and more. As I said earlier, like kind of post-COVID, we want more fulfillment and engagement out of our jobs, and employers are kind of meeting that need a little bit more, or at least trying to. And the third reason why we want you to define fulfillment first, and we'll go to this next slide because we talk about this a little bit more here, is that we find that when people start with the fulfillment piece of our ideal career model versus, for example, just looking at, okay, I'm good at this and I would get paid well, so let me go brainstorm ideas based on that. They're going to have a lot more ideas, and you will have and be able to brainstorm and identify a lot more career ideas based on the fulfillment piece. And then you can narrow those down based on practical considerations. It, bottom line, will help you really, really see what else is out there that you didn't know existed, or give you a lot more ideas than just like, okay, here's a couple of paths that I could consider, and okay, I'll just choose one of those. So fulfillment is the most difficult to define, like we said. It's also important because it impacts all areas of our career fit and satisfaction as well. So for example, if you just took a job or brainstormed ideas based on strengths and maybe compensation, and you forgot about fulfillment and work environment or any of these other pieces, it's not going to be a fit for you. So we want you to look at all elements of our career model when you're brainstorming ideas, but start with fulfillment first, because if you get that fulfillment piece in line, all of those other pieces are going to fall into place a lot more easily. And finally, like we said earlier, most people want to have a sense of fulfillment, especially I think post-COVID. But even beyond that, we've always been saying that that's really important, because whether we're happy at our jobs affects us personally as well. We spend a lot of time at work. So it's a really, really important piece. So how do we define this fulfillment piece? So we'll start with this one, and then in the next couple of slides, we'll go into greater depth with our ideal career model, just FYI. So a couple of different ways that you can define fulfillment for you that we like for our clients to implement. Number one is to journal and think about, for 5 minutes, it doesn't have to take that long, about what does success mean to you? Like, so define success, and what does that mean to you? Is it about your coworkers and having good relationships with them and feeling like you're part of a team? Is it that you're making a certain amount of money, or is it both of those things? Is it that you want to feel like you're making a difference or having an impact on other people's lives or your organization? Everyone defines success in different ways. So we want you to like just spit out on paper. Don't overthink it or think about it too much. And when you think about, okay, how do I define success and what does it mean to me? Just blurt it out on a piece of paper, because it will be really interesting and can be really interesting what comes out of your head that you may not have even realized, as well as things that you already realized. So you're starting to paint that picture of success, and those are clues to what would be most rewarding and fulfilling to you in a possible next job. The second thing you can do, and we really like this one, we like all of them, but we like this one as well, or especially, because if you start to think also about your interests, your hobbies, those things where you tend to lose track of time, whether it's inside of work or outside of work, even if those hobbies, for example, are not practical career ideas for you. Like, for example, if you really like photography or something like that, but you don't feel like you want to be an entrepreneur and, start your own business, et cetera, et cetera. What is appealing to you about that hobby, whatever your different hobby is? What's appealing to you about that could be clues to, or give you clues to, what could be rewarding and fulfilling to you in a job. So for example, if it's creativity, if it's flexibility, if your passion for something that you're interested in is about analyzing something a little bit more, or like, for example, if we have a client who likes crime, TV shows or something like that. Okay, that doesn't mean they should go be an investigator necessarily. That may not be practical for them. But what is it about that? Is it the problem solving, and they'd like to have a little bit more about that in their career path? So digging underneath these interests and hobbies could actually give you some clues to what some of your possible values are, or some elements of an ideal career that you might want to incorporate into your next job. A third thing you could do, is listed on the right-hand side of this slide, is to think about your ideal day at work and what qualities would it have, and spend a few minutes just thinking about that. None of this has to take a lot of time. It's like brainstorming and kind of visioning. And what some of our clients really like to do is, with an ideal day at work, they like to create a vision board. So this could be a journaling exercise, or it could be a visioning exercise, whatever works best for you. And then the fourth way to define fulfillment, and we always do this one with our clients as well as like an interactive exercise, is to identify their top 3 career values using a peak experience exercise. So a moment or a period in time when they felt like things were rocking and rolling and they were on top of the world, and what were the qualities that were present there. So if it was a trip that they took, for example, or a vacation, was it more for them about the planning of the vacation and the logistics, or was it more about the experience of, let's say, being outside or going to museums or the food or whatever it is? You can start to identify your values by thinking about peak experiences in your life and what those common themes were. Another way to identify your values is some of the things that rub you the wrong way, where you get aggravated, whether it's coworkers at work or other things. Sometimes clues to our values can come from things that bother us or drive us crazy too. So these are 2 different ways that you can start to think about your values. And values are a really good way to think about or start to identify like possible different career paths. So for example, if one of your values is education, or another one of your values is analyzing or planning, those are some career paths that you could look into. Is it project management? Is it planning and logistics in some way, et cetera, et cetera? So your values could be qualities about the job that you want to have, or it could give you specific career ideas. So there's different ways that you can use your values to brainstorm ideas. So we'd love to know in our next poll, and this is our last one actually for today, how many people actually already do know what their career values are. And the cool thing, and again, I think this is, one of the silver linings of COVID, is that I've noticed when we conduct this poll in our webinars that more and more people have actually thought about and know what their values are, which is a good thing because we're getting clearer about things. So love for you to complete this next poll for us if you would. Now, I said a second ago, related to your values, when you're starting to identify what they are, that it's a good idea to then clarify for yourself which values are career values or ones that you would want to honor in your professional life versus which ones are more personal values, ones that you're okay honoring in your personal life. Career values tend to be values that are higher priority for us as a person. So I'll use me as a quick example. One of my top 2 values, just regardless of career or personal, when I did this exercise a long time ago, are authenticity and risk. Authenticity is the way I run my business, and it's the reason why I started my business, is to help people be more authentic and have a career that was aligned with who they are as a person, so that they're happier in their jobs. So for me, because those 2 top values are just important to me as a person, I wanted those to be present in my career path. The second one of risk is when I thought about being a business owner and an entrepreneur, and whether that could work for me and whether I could tolerate like having that risk and trying something new like this, I was actually okay with it. And I liked the idea because it's one of my top values. So when you're thinking about career versus personal values, 9 times out of 10, your top 2 or 3 values that you come up with out of one of these exercises is going to be something that you honor or want to honor in some way professionally. And the way that you honor it can look very different. And we talk with our clients about this kind of stuff all the time to help them sort it out, because I know it can be a little bit overwhelming and confusing to kind of know the difference. But this gives you a beginning of a clue to how you kind of separate the 2, if you will. And as I said earlier, looking at the poll results, more and more people, 53% feel like they do, which is fantastic. 47% feel like they don't. Don't worry about it. If that's you, that's why you're here today. No problem. But more and more people, I think, are paying attention to this idea of values and what's important to them. And when we look at our career model, let's look at our second method for or way to brainstorm different career ideas. Like we said a moment ago, there's a chance that you can brainstorm career ideas based on some of your values, depending on what you came up with. If some of your values are really tangible, like the ones I gave a moment ago, if education and mentoring or training is a value, or analyzing or planning or something like that, those are values that could be clues to possible career paths that are a little bit more tangible that you could plug in to our career brainstorming process that we're going to go over in just a few minutes. If some of your values are a little more generic, kind of like mine were, like I said, authenticity and risk, and it would be like, okay, how do those translate into career ideas? Well, that's where for me, I had to like dig underneath that. Like, what does authenticity mean a little bit more? And what are some of the things to me in terms of a career path? And what are some of my strengths that I have? So when I looked back, for example, at some of my strengths and overlaid those with some of my values, and I also thought about the classes, for example, that I took at Vanderbilt. I loved my psychology classes. And I had considered being a therapist at one time or some sort of counselor. So that's how you can start to intertwine, if you will, your values to turn them into some possible career ideas. I liked that idea of educating people and I liked that idea of counseling, but I realized when I was thinking about the next best step for me in my career, that counseling would be maybe a little too heavy duty for me. I would get upset, I think, with clients and that would not, or patients, and that would not go well. And at the time too, I had already completed a master's degree and I wasn't that interested in that moment, at least in going back to get, additional PhD, et cetera, et cetera. And I liked the idea of counseling in a different way. So I started brainstorming counseling. And that's where I came up with the idea of career coaching by doing this kind of research. So with our ideal career model, here's what we want you to do. And this will help you brainstorm different ideas. So we talked about values and fulfillment already. So what comes out of this for you in terms of your values and what would be most appealing for you? We also want you, and you can brainstorm different career paths thinking about the tasks that you enjoy in your current job or have enjoyed in previous jobs. So if you're like, Hallie, I don't like any of my tasks in my current job, and that's why I'm here, think about previous positions that you've held, whether they're formal actual jobs or even board positions or volunteer positions. What are the tasks that you gravitate to? And does that give you some possible keywords that you could plug into like job boards or Google to brainstorm alternative career ideas? That's what the enjoyment piece is about here. Then we want you to look at your strengths. We use the Strengths Finder assessment with our clients. There are lots of different assessments out there. But identifying and understanding what you're really good at in your current job or in previous jobs can help you also come up with different keywords that you could plug in to our career brainstorming process as we go. And we're talking about that in our third step. So look at what some of your strengths are and where do you excel, but also like, what are the strengths that you'd like to leverage at this point in your career? Because sometimes clients will come to us and say, I'm really good at this, but I don't want to do that anymore. I'm sick of spreadsheets or, whatever it is. So think about the strengths that you would like to either bring forward in this next career path and do more of, some that you might want to kind of let go of a little bit more, or do you want to leverage your strengths in a different and new way, in a different and new role or industry? And that would be, a different way to brainstorm things. We then want you to look at, and actually, I'm just going to go to, no, I'm going to stay on this slide. Sorry, everybody. I don't want to confuse everyone. Then we want you to look at the education and experience piece. Remember how I said a few minutes ago with my past coursework, even in undergrad, and that was a long time ago because I'm 50, there were clues to possible career ideas there. And I had just forgotten about some of those classes, but I was like, oh, I did love those. So look at any education that you've had at TCU and outside of that, and where are there themes in the things that you really enjoyed? And do the same thing with your experience. Look at not just your current experience in your current position, but your past experience as well. What were the highlights? What were the things that you really enjoyed? And can you get back to some of those things or incorporate some of those elements in your next career path and maybe adjust your list of keywords? Your personality type is important, but I'll be clear with this one is that personality type with the career model is not going to help you come up with like career or keywords, if you will, for career brainstorming. This is more about whether you're more introverted or extroverted, whether you like to be more in front and a leader, This affects more the type of role that you'd like to be in and maybe the type of organization. So the personality and work environment and compensation pieces of the model are going to be less about coming up with specific keywords, because you can't say, okay, jobs for introverts. I mean, you actually could, but you're going to get a really long list. So you could try that, but just know that you might have to wade through a lot of things, but it could help you brainstorm ideas. These other pieces of the model are going to give you more tangible kind of keywords that you could plug into job boards and Google and stuff too. That does not mean that we don't want you to consider them. So when you're starting to narrow down your list of career ideas, so you've come up with like a nice, really long list based on these beginning pieces of the model, you can start to narrow down those ideas based on personality type, work environment, and compensation, okay? So these are the idea generators here. These are the ones where you start to narrow things down a little bit more based on practical considerations. What's going to be realistic for me? What is going to be the right work environment? And what is going to be the right compensation for me as well? So hopefully that makes sense. Ask questions if needed in the Q&A box. So the deal with the career model is it will help you brainstorm ideas at the beginning and start to narrow them down based on practical considerations. Now, we want you to consider each piece of the model. So a couple of things here that we want to say, and then we'll keep moving. Don't forget about any of the pieces of the model. So when you're brainstorming ideas and you start to pick from a list of options, don't forget about work environment and go off the range. And for example, say, okay, well, I want to work at this place that is going to expect me to be an introvert or an extrovert all the time, and I'm introverted, and that's not going to work for me. A lot of times people will get excited about a job, which I get, and they'll forget that, oh wait, there's this one element and I forgot to consider that. Make sure that you consider all of the pieces. And second, at the beginning of your brainstorming, think way outside the box and go crazy with it. Put practical considerations to the side at the beginning for me. Because if you bring practical considerations in too quickly, you're going to cut yourself off at the knees with really like researching what else is out there. There are so many jobs that we don't even know exist. I mean, this is part of what's fun for us as career coaches and the coaches on my team to like see what else is out there, is because we'll talk with people and we're like, I've never heard of that job before. It sounds so cool and interesting. So give yourself at least a couple of hours, I would say, of brainstorming. It doesn't have to be all in one sitting. It can be over the course of several days. And I recommend that actually. Do some brainstorming and some research, put it down and come back to it like in a week or a few days or whatever it is. Because with a fresh pair of eyes, you'll see things differently. But really make a commitment to not thinking about salary and compensation at the very beginning, which is why we have it at the end here, because you can narrow down this really great, awesome list of ideas that you now have that you would not have thought of otherwise based on those practical considerations. And like we said earlier, you can start to compromise at that point. Okay, so this is our ideal career model. This is unique to our coaching. It's something that I actually came up with early on in my coaching practice because I realized that people would need something tangible and practical to latch onto, to really just use as a checklist. So you can print this out and use it as a checklist to say, okay, let me brainstorm ideas based on these different pieces and let me make sure I'm narrowing them down in the right way too. And just really quickly, before we start to get to our very specific process about career brainstorming online, I know for some people here today, some of this might feel overwhelming, and I totally get that. And that's why we're here. If you feel like you need specific advice for your unique situation or need to get into this a little bit in greater depth, we'd be happy to do a free consult with you. You just email us. This is the same email address that is for the slides. So you can ask for both at the same time if you'd like to do that. Happy to chat with you about what we do. Let's talk next about our career brainstorming process. And this is the very kind of tangible way that you're going to take some of the keywords and the themes of things that you've been thinking about in our previous exercises, the visioning, the journaling, all of that using the model, that you can start to plug into specific websites, etc., to see what different career ideas are out there. And we know this brainstorming process can be problematic for people, which is why we have a specific process. It gets overwhelming. There's no website out there, unfortunately, that has a comprehensive list of every single job that's out there, right? And there's so many different factors to consider. So we really want you to follow this brainstorming process, please, like letter to the law or whatever that saying is. I always get that wrong, because it will help you not get lost in the internet. How many people have done this before where okay, I'm going to do some research and now I've spent an hour in front of my computer, I'm down a rabbit hole and I have no idea where I went. That's happened to me before. So we want you to follow this 4-step process, identifying keywords, which is what we've been already talking about. We want you to plug those keywords into general search sites, career brainstorming sites, and job boards as well. And we'll go through each one of these in the next few minutes here before we get to our Q&A. And I am paying attention to our time, so we have enough time for that. So before you start the process of even generating your keywords, we want you to get and stay organized throughout the whole process of brainstorming. An Excel spreadsheet is a great way to track your relevant keywords, your career ideas, the web pages that you want to revisit, the job requirements that you're seeing, and the salary and everything else. So use Excel or Word or whatever it is. If you're a Mac user, whatever they use for that, just do something so that you are very methodical and like step-by-step about this process, okay? And be organized with it, like see it as a step-by-step process. We don't expect you to do career brainstorming all in one fell swoop and then, oh my gosh, it's all figured out. Like that's unrealistic. Give yourself time to do this. Like we said, at least a couple of good solid hours of brainstorming, and it may require a little bit more. But the first thing you want to do is create some sort of spreadsheet and way to keep your thoughts organized, okay? And then once you do that, there are certain websites that we want you to visit. We want you to use sites like Google or Bing or whatever, Safari. That's what we mean by general search sites. So you can plug in keyword strings like jobs in data analysis or jobs in project management or jobs in or related to education. And you can do the same thing with careers. That's what you would plug in as like a keyword string, if you will, of jobs in or related to, and it will come up with information, I promise. We do this all the time with clients. The career sites or career brainstorming sites, we should say, I'll list those and I'll give you those in just a moment. We're going to list those twice in the next couple of slides. And then we do find it's valuable to look at job boards too. You'll notice that these sites, that the way we're suggesting this is kind of like a funnel. You start with the large kind of general broad stroke sites like Google, just to see like in general what's out there that can kind of give you some ideas. Then you look at and narrow things down a little bit more using the same keywords on career brainstorming sites, and then the same thing with job boards too, where you're making it a little bit more real and you kind of see what's out there. I'm going to leave this up for a moment so you can see what we're talking about and what we recommend in terms of career brainstorming sites, and you can write them down, or remember you can get our slides. I don't know if I can put the slides in the chat box, the email address. Maybe Brooke or Terrence can do that in a moment. But comment from someone in the Q&A box, which thank you for this. So you need to define the terms you are using in advance of this. Career topics, career values, listing them, defining them would be helpful. So let me give you some examples. I gave you some examples just a moment ago, but values like education, if you really value and enjoy working with people to educate them on some particular topic, or if you really gravitate to or enjoy tasks that relate to or involve some kind of analysis, whether it's data analysis or it's problem solving in some way, shape, or form. Those are some examples of possible values. And by the way, too, I've had clients Google career values and they will come up with, there's lists of possible career values out there too, as well as how to define them. The way that we define career values is it's things that and tasks or types of projects that you really enjoy in terms of your professional life. So what are your strengths? What do you gravitate to in terms of what you enjoy and what you're really good at professionally? That's how we define what career values mean. And when you perform that task, or when you complete that project, for example, you feel like fulfilled, authentic, lit up, like in the flow, like it gave you energy versus draining you. So thanks for mentioning that. I'm going to put answer live here so we can close that out to give you a little bit more tangible, specific examples. So here are some of the career brainstorming sites that we recommend and like. onetcenter.org is one, myplan.com is one, bls.gov, is another one. So these are some of the career brainstorming sites that exist out there. You'll notice, for example, that myplan.com, it looks like it's a little bit more geared toward recent college grads. Even if you're mid-career or more senior in your career, these websites can all still be really helpful, because what you're doing is you're plugging keywords into these particular websites, and they will show you basically, okay, these are some of the career ideas that use these types of skills, strengths, or have these in their job descriptions. Some of the job boards that we like to start out with for this brainstorming are things like Indeed, LinkedIn, Glassdoor, etc. And then it's a good idea later on to look at industry specific websites as well to brainstorm some different ideas. Okay, so let's talk about what we mean by keywords first, and we'll go through this process step by step, and then we'll get to some Q&A too. So with your keywords, as we've mentioned earlier, it could be some of your skills or strengths. It could be a list of some of your interests. It could be a list of some of your values. Again, really tangible words that come up for you like over and over when you're thinking about and using the career model can help you come up with some of your keywords. And I've given you some examples as we've progressed today too. Step 2 is you want to plug those keywords into the general search sites like Google, careers in data analysis, or jobs in education, careers in event planning, or whatever it is. Even if you're not sure if those different career paths would be appealing for you, reading a little bit more about them will help you narrow your ideas a little bit more. Step number 3, the career brainstorming sites. Keywords plugged into these sites will help you narrow your ideas, but also will start to help you make it a little bit more real. Because, for example, on bls.gov, which is the Bureau of Labor and Statistics from the US government, those sites will start to show you, okay, here are some of the job requirements, and maybe give you some salary ranges in some cases as well. And we had a question, are the salaries accurate on these sites? Yes, they usually are. The problem with these sites is that the salary ranges usually can be a little bit broad and large. And so normally with our clients, when they do their salary research, it's good because they come, with some numbers and kind of a range with us, and we help them narrow down what would make the most sense for them based on their geographic location, how much experience they've had, etc. But as a general rule of thumb, yes, the salary ranges are accurate there. So these brainstorming sites can give you additional ideas, but can also help you make things a little bit more real and tangible as well. And step 4, as we said, we'd like you to consider plugging your keywords into job boards. The reason why this can be helpful is this shows you exactly like what is out there right now. And the keywords are not just being searched for just in the job title, but also in the job description. So for example, if let's just say event planning is something that's appealing to you as a possible keyword and maybe a possible career path. If you plug that into a job board, you're going to come up with and see other jobs that may have event planning as part of what the job description entails or is required, but it's not the main thing. And that can help you brainstorm other ideas. It's kind of like spokes on a bicycle wheel that you'll start to see, oh, okay, there's this other job. Maybe this is a different keyword that I want to add to my list that could be related to event planning and has that as part of what I do, but it's not necessarily the only thing that you do. Overview of sites again. Let's get to our Q&A because I want to make sure we have time for this. I'll leave this up for a moment. And also on the next slide too, we'll give you some additional possible action steps that you can take, as well as if you want a copy of the slides as well, so you can write those down too. So remember, think about this as brainstorming and kind of casting your net really wide at the beginning. And we also like, especially with your values exercise, and honestly with any brainstorming exercise that you do, it's a really good idea to talk with friends and family members, people that know you well as people like a coach or someone else that doesn't know you as well, that can be objective with your search and your brainstorming of ideas. People that know you well can help you clarify what your values are a little bit more, or validate what your list is that you've come up with. They can help you clarify a little bit more what your strengths and skills are, and even brainstorm alternative career ideas based on what some of those strengths are too. So it's a really good idea to talk with other people when you're brainstorming different ideas, so that you can generate more ideas from, what they understand and know about you, but also other career paths that they've heard of or know about. So let's go ahead and do our Q&A and also talk about taking action. And if anyone would like to share their action steps in the Q&A box, that would be fantastic as well, because we'd love to hear, based on where you are in your kind of career brainstorming process, what would be best for you. But some of the things we would recommend are to identify your values and review the ideal career model. Literally use it as a checklist. For example, if you already have some ideas that you're considering, use that as a checklist to narrow down, okay, what is really going to cover all of the bases here. Other people might be at the very beginning of this process and they need to start brainstorming ideas kind of from scratch and at the beginning. We would recommend thinking about values and strengths. Those two areas can be the best kind of areas to say, okay, where am I getting the most tangible kind of keywords that I can plug in to these different three types of websites, if you will, that will give me the most ideas. And then if you'd like a copy of the slides and want to talk with me, happy to talk with you further. Use the email address here at the bottom. So let's go ahead and see if there are any questions. Please feel free to fill those out or put those in the chat box. And I don't know about you, but I felt like this time went really fast. Maybe it was because I was talking a lot.
I felt that it's the same way, Hallie. We do have a question that I just received through the chat, but direct message to me. It has to do with the fulfillment, kind of making that list. The question is, how do I know if I'm putting too much down? Like, am I over describing and putting too much constraints on this list for the perfect job?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. I like that a lot. Thank you for asking. In the fulfillment piece, and I would say with the fulfillment and the strengths piece, those two in particular, I wouldn't want you to have more than like 5 things in that list, honestly, because I think having more is just going to be overwhelming and make it too perfectionistic, like you're saying, and maybe too specific. When you get to things like work environment and personality type, more than 5 is okay. I wouldn't go more than 10 all told. And I think the other thing that can be helpful to do in this particular scenario too, is to try to, as best as you can, prioritize. Because once you get then, further down your list, those are the ones that you could start to say to yourself, these are things I could compromise on a little bit if I had to, because they're lower on my list. So that's how I would approach it. It's a really good question. I don't think anyone's ever asked that before, and I like it. Anything else? Let me go over here and see. Okay, so in the chat box. Oh, and we answered those 2 already. Okay, cool. Any other questions? Please feel free to message Brooke or Terrence directly or put them in the chat. Okay, so yeah, here they come.
Yep,
I knew
coming in now. Yeah.
Yeah, we always want to give people a minute. I'm more introverted too, so my questions usually take a little bit longer, so I totally get that. Okay, so we've got one here about, I've been volunteering in development and fundraising for 20 years since undergraduate. That's amazing. Good for you. I've been unsuccessful in landing an interview in this field for the past year. How does someone display their volunteer service on their resume? This is a great question. And just by the way, when you're one way to leverage your current and past volunteer experience is networking and talking with people. So just use it in that way as well. But to display this on your resume and even on LinkedIn. So remember, LinkedIn has a section for your volunteer experience. And I would not even allow it to be just kind of buried at the bottom, but I would reference it a little bit in your about section too. On your resume, especially if you're trying to get into this type of field, whether it's nonprofit or whatever, I would put all of your volunteer experience at the bottom, like where, it would make the most sense to have that list. but I would also be weaving it into your summary statement at the top and your skills section as well. So that, again, it doesn't get buried at the bottom. So you want to mention like the types of organizations where you volunteered, the results that you achieved through that volunteering. And even at the top in your summary statement, how many years you've been volunteering. So again, have the long list at the bottom, just so you're covering your bases there and they know that, you know, all the different places, but weave it into your narrative and the summary as well. Okay, so that's what I would do. Hopefully that answers like as a start. And then a next question, when I look on the websites, the pay is not enough to ever be able to send my child. Oh yeah, sorry. Okay, got it. I love this. My child to TCU. Are there many jobs that pay that amount? It's not as many, right? Because as you go higher up the pay scale, it requires more experience, et cetera, et cetera. But yes, they're definitely out there. It's about what your qualifications are, you know, if you need to be like what your education is, what your, you know, if you're certified in whatever type of job it is that you're going for, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you can find jobs that pay the amount that you are asking for and need and want, but it's very dependent on your expertise, your experience, and your qualifications. So you've got to be realistic about that too. And if you say, for example, okay, this can't happen tomorrow, but this could happen in 5 years, how do I move in that direction? Then you want to make your plan for that. Look on people's LinkedIn profiles who are in that type of job and what was their path? What are the, you know, types of roles they had along the way? And those could help you identify some of your goals.
And that's a perfect segue to the next question, Hallie.
It is.
You've talked a lot about this before, so this is a great question. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. How important is having a LinkedIn profile to potential employers? It's pretty much a make or break. So I will say, to be honest, though, that some industries do not use LinkedIn quite as much. For example, like the medical industry and education industries. They don't use LinkedIn quite as much or have not historically. But outside of those, and I'm even like making the argument these days that LinkedIn is a make or break regardless of your industry, it's just critically important because it's usually the first thing that employer is going to look at after you apply to a job. And if they Google you, that's usually the first thing that's going to come up. So I would definitely spend time on your LinkedIn profile because aside from certain kind of unusual situations where they're not going to look at it quite as much, across the board, it's really important. So it's a good question. Thanks for asking. Anybody else? And it looks like we're getting close to time anyway. Oh, good. Okay. Does this team have recommendations? Oh, let me say this out loud just in case. Does this team have recommendations for recruiting headhunting groups that help connect to new opportunities once we define which types we would like to target? Yes, we do. But in full transparency, we don't have this huge long roster of like, oh, we know all these recruiters and headhunters. So we do have a handful. And I usually have networking connections through LinkedIn to at least a handful for each person. I help our clients with networking connections outside of that as well. And just as kind of a side note, we do suggest looking for recruiters and headhunters that are local to your area, that are like the smaller, like ones that have that geographic specific knowledge too. So yes, being clear about it, but also look for people that are specific to your area as well. Great question. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, and Terrence and I both have connections with alumni who, again, it's geographically or they are industry specific. So you're more than welcome to reach out to us and we can try to connect you, or kind of doing some of that own like work on your part of finding somebody who is in the industry you're hoping to break into, or in the Houston area, for example.
Yeah, alumni network is huge, and they do not pay me to say this. I say this to all of our clients. Alumni networking, warm leads, really big. And then a final question. Yes, we do offer coaching and consulting for people's LinkedIn profiles. Brooke and Terrence, I'm not sure if you all offer that. We do that on our end. Do you all help alum with that?
We do
Yes,
have.
Terrence does, yeah.
Definitely. I'll be scheduled through our Handshake platform. And so I'm happy to do a LinkedIn consultation, even some of the jobs or strategies, career advice. And I frequently mention Hallie's ideal career workbook as part of my verbiage now. So it's just a natural thing. So Hallie and I are typically on the same page, consistent messaging. So if I ever get stumped or you want a second opinion, another set of eyes, I'm always more than happy to recommend Hallie as another expert leading voice in this industry.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, I think we're on the same page, like in terms of how we approach career brainstorming. So when you meet with Terrence, like he'll be echoing the same things. And I know that it can feel overwhelming. So just try to take it step by step, and really use our model to use as a checklist too. So, and Brooke and Terrence, they're asking how, oh, good. Okay, good. In the chat feature is their contact information. So
And
check out.
Hallie, I'm also adding the admin email. So people, I know that's on the bottom of your slide, but I'm going to go ahead and add that so people can copy and paste that.
Okay, awesome. Thanks. Because I wasn't sure. I can't do to everyone. So I just wanted to make sure I wasn't just sending it to you guys, which wouldn't help. That's wonderful. All right, cool. So before we go, any final thoughts that you all have? And I really appreciate everyone's time today. Like I said, I know this can feel overwhelming. So just really try to take it in baby steps. And I highly recommend doing, okay, let me think about, my values and strengths, one day, and then give it a few days and come back to it. Like, this is not a one and done, like it's going to get figured out, quickly. And it actually will be easier than you realize. So just try some of the exercises that we talked about, because you will get clarity from them. And it may seem overwhelming now, but if you just try them out, you'll figure out so much more faster than you realize. So that's all I want to say in closing.
Hallie, thank you again for another wonderful webinar session. I know this is a great place for a lot of people to start when they're trying to evaluate their current situation. Oh, looks like we had one more question last in here at the buzzer. Is there entrepreneur help?
We do help with that. I don't know, Terrence,
Yeah.
how much you all do.
No, we do as well. In terms of finding potential entrepreneurs for networking purposes, we recommend One Frogs Connect or our own network through the Career Center. So I would say email me, make an appointment with me using Handshake, and we're happy to talk about that path or find other alums who have gone down a similar path to get you connected with.
That's great. Talking to other people who are down that path already is fantastic. So really good. Okay,
Great.
cool.
Well, thank you again, Hallie. We are really excited to have you back. I know we're gathering again next month to kind of continue the conversation on careers and those next steps. I think next time is solving career burnout and how to get re-inspired, which could go hand in hand with what we're talking about today. So if you are interested in learning more about that, please stay tuned to your email. We will be sending out a follow-up email to this session today, and we appreciate your time. And thank you again, Hallie and Terrence, and we'll look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you. Go Frogs.
Go Frogs.